The lion is often called the king of the jungle, which is weird because they don't actually live in the jungle, but that doesn't detract in any way from the mastery that they have over their domain. Lions might be big on pride, but there's nothing gay about them. In all mighty warrior races, a great conqueror arises every so often to write his name in the history books with the blood of the vanquished and carve out an empire that changes the face of the earth as we know it. And on their own smaller scale, lions are no exception. But today's video isn't just about one great lion. This video is about the absolute triumph, carnage and devastation caused by just 6 lions. 6 lions that all the other lions were afraid of because they hunted other lions. The Mapogo Lion Coalition. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. But before we get started, this video is brought to you by Fume. Fume is an award-winning device that is all about helping you break your bad habits in an innovative way. But breaking a bad habit doesn't have to be an uncomfortable or drastic change, so Fume is here to remove the bad from the habit. Instead of using electronics and annoying people with giant flavoured clouds, Fume is completely natural and instead uses flavoured air. Not only is the air flavoured, it is made using all natural delicious flavours that contain no harmful chemicals. So Fume really is all good with none of the bad. You can simply enjoy your habit guilt-free and replace your old bad habits easily. Your Fume will come with an adjustable airflow dial that is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers something to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. After trying the new Fume flavours myself, I was honestly very surprised at how flavourful it is. It feels very fresh and the moving parts are great for helping to fight stress. I have been feeling great since using it. You can upgrade your Journey Pack to the Solano to enjoy the premium walnut barrel and onyx black coated mouthpiece that has a smoother finish and still get yourself a discount. Stopping is something that we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable and even fun. Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Fume has also released some new flavour cores. These cores include orange vanilla, raspberry lemon and sparkling grapefruit. I've had the chance to try all 3 of these flavours and they are all delicious. The orange vanilla flavour is sweet and citrusy with a touch of classic vanilla, the raspberry lemon flavour is full-bodied lemonade with a hint of berries, and the sparkling grapefruit flavour is a fresh and cooling fruity grapefruit. So join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com/Dankula or scan the QR code on the screen to get an amazing 10% off site-wide. That's tryfum.com and use code Dankula to save an additional 10% off on your order today. Click the link, show them some love. While many believe that lions are feminists because the lionesses do all of the hunting, it's really just because even across species, women belong in the kitchen. It's still the males that are in charge of defending the pride's territory. Sure, the women get to play attacking pathetic little antelopes and zebras, but even in nature, it's still the men who go to war. And females get to live in the safety of the pride once they grow up, whereas the males are pretty much kicked out when they turn 2 or 3 years old. And they are expected to go off and found or conquer their own pride. However, it's not that simple. It's a big, scary and dangerous world out there, and these male lions are still young and inexperienced, so they need a little help. Because there are no lion universities to charge exorbitant fees for glorified daycare, adolescent lions that are kicked out at the same time tend to form coalitions. Now, the pride system is a complete family unit of lions, lionesses, and cubs, and coalitions differ in that they are just a group of male lions. Members of lion coalitions are usually blood related because they form bonds early on in their life before leaving the pride to seek out prey and females on their own. Also, interpride relations between lions are not great, to say the least, but we'll get onto that later. But other than blood ties, coalitions form simply because there is safety in numbers. Hunting and taking over territory is much more easily done with the boys than alone. So, working together ensures greater access to lionesses and improved chances of repelling other upstarts that might be by themselves or in smaller coalitions. The Mapogo Coalition, who we will be discussing today, are believed to have been named after a South African security company that was known for being a bit too heavy-handed, though it's also suggested that the name might come from Mapogo, which is a Zulu word for rogues. Either way, the name fits. The Mapogos hailed from the Sparta Pride in Kruger National Park in South Africa, and they were the sons of lions known as the West Street Males. The Sparta Pride is another name that really fits. The Mapogos were led by the eldest lion, Makulu, whose name actually means big or impressive in Zulu. He was born in 1998, and he was actually an outsider who joined the coalition in July of the year 2000, taking the place of a 20-month-old male that the coalition had lost. Now, you may or may not know that lions do not take kindly to outsiders at all, but Makulu might have been accepted on the grounds that while his mother was from another pride, his father might also have been a West Street male. The other 5 members of the coalition were all certainly biological brothers who were born into the Sparta Pride between 2001 and 2002, and they lived together for their whole lives. Now, anthropologists aren't exactly the most creative bunch, so they took a pretty Socratic approach to naming the other Mapogos. There was Pretty Boy, who notably had fewer scars than his brothers and was more brains than brawn. Mr. T was the exact opposite and was the most brutal of the Mapogos, and he was named for his distinctive mohawk. Another one was called Kinky Tail, who had a kink in his tail. Also named after a physical defect was Skew Spine, also known as Scar, who had a scar on his spine and left hip. And finally, there was Dreadlocks, who earned his name by getting something caught in his mane that had matted into a dreadlock. He was also nicknamed Rasta. While all of the Mapogos had their unique features, the one thing that they all had in common was the black tint to their manes. Because no teenage edgy boy going out into the world for the first time is complete without one. In 2004, the Mapogos just couldn't wait to be king, and they left the Sparta Pride to strike out on their own. They started out by scavenging from what lionesses left behind after hunting, or fighting them to steal their fresh kills, which gave them the strength that they needed to embark on their training arc. The Mapogos honed their hunting skills over the next few months, and they became excellent fighters both as individuals and as a unit. Thanks to their solid teamwork and the over-the-top aggression of Kinky Tail and especially Mr. T, they were able to take down some really big prey, including hippos, young rhinos, and giraffes. But the Mapogos' main fare that really bulked them up was the buffalo, which experts think was the cause of their sheer size and strength. Adult buffaloes can weigh up to a ton, so regularly eating a literal ton of protein is of course going to result in some serious gains. The Mapogos' diet actually brought them a very long way in making them a force to be reckoned with, but they were also notable for their numbers. I've already mentioned that there is safety in numbers, but most lion coalitions are made up of just 2 or 3 males. So the fact that there were half a dozen Mapogos made them a veritable powerhouse. In general, lion prides were a bit bigger than usual in Kruger National Park because the abundance of prey made life very good for predators. Though these bigger prides still tended to only have about 4 or 5 males, which still put the Mapogos at a pretty solid advantage. In 2006, the Mapogo Coalition arrived in the Sabi Sand Nature Reserve, which is located within Kruger National Park. They had just walked into a massive ecosystem with a great diversity of habitats and wildlife, containing 2,000 plant species and hundreds of species of mammals, including all of the iconic animals that you can think of: leopards, elephants, buffalo, hippos, giraffes, and most notably, other lions. Sabi Sands was home to several prides of lions, who would have not taken very kindly to the Mapogos showing up on their turf. But how they felt about it didn't matter. The Mapogos were gearing up for war. They didn't come here for food. They came here for a fucking fight. When planning invasions, most lions tend to sneak in and use the element of surprise. But not the Mapogos. They didn't give a fuck. They did not fucking care. They just sauntered in there and loudly called out the incumbent Ottawa Pride. The Ottawa Pride accepted their challenge and met them in open combat. And one of their males was killed by the Mapogo and the other 3 were routed. The Mapogos had just conquered their first territory. And to the victors, the spoils. 3 lionesses and 11 cubs. Now, for those of you who don't know much about lions, when male lions get a hold of cubs that aren't theirs, they were slaughtered, all of them, every single one. that's just, you know, nature's like that sometimes. Some of the cubs were even just outright eaten by Mr. T. I tell you what though, these names are making this dark subject matter a lot easier to deal with. As for the lionesses, well, there's a reason why a third of the world is directly descended from Genghis Khan. They were feeling the love tonight, you know, whether they wanted to or not. But the Mapogos didn't stop there. They challenged and killed every male lion that they came across. And not just the males, but the females and the cubs too. Because you see, in lion culture, infanticide is very, very common in interpride conflicts. After all, it's not enough for a male to just install himself at the top of a new pride that he has just conquered. He also has to wipe out his rival's entire bloodline and clear out the lioness's offspring to prepare them for mating with him. And they often had to kill some of the lionesses as well, since obviously some of them would fight back to try and protect their cubs. It may be a bit obvious considering their status as apex predators, but male lions are the biggest cause of lion infant mortality. But the Mapogos took this even further with their sheer sadism, because Mr. T actually just eating the Ottawa cubs was no isolated incident. Despite being very, very rare in lions, cannibalism was a very common habit for the Mapogos. And it must have been pretty shocking for park rangers when it turned out that Mr. T was more like Hannibal. The Mapogos' conquest of the Sabi Sands was practically an extinction event. Seriously, park rangers were getting extremely concerned with the amount of male lions and cubs that the Mapogos were wiping out. And all they could do was sit back and watch. They weren't allowed to intervene. Park rangers are allowed to get involved if it's a natural disaster or if it's poachers. But if it's nature versus nature and it's just nature doing its thing, then they're not allowed to get involved at all. All they could do was sit back and watch this horrendous shit go down. For some perspective on how brutal their conquest was, the Mapogos faced off against 2 male lions from the Kahuma Pride in December of 2007. One of the Kahuma males was later found so badly wounded that he couldn't move. and the Mapogos were less than 200 metres away from him, mating with two of his lionesses. Those were his final moments. They made him watch. They made him fucking watch. That lion had been broken both physically and spiritually, but at least the Mapogos were kind enough to deliver a coup de grace after they were done, because his mutilated remains were found the next day. While a number of prides were very heavily affected by the Mapogos' reign of terror, the five that suffered the most were the Castleton Pride, whose numbers were reduced from 22 to 6, the Salala Pride, which was halved from 10 lions down to 5, the 10-strong Zimanvinyana Pride, which was completely fucking wiped out, and 40% of all of the lions in Elephant Plains were killed by the Mapogos, which accounts for 40 to 50 casualties in the area. But that's not all. Willem Botha, the assistant warden and head of anti-poaching in the Sabi Sands, had a pretty staggering idea of the true extent of the Mapogos' bloodshed, saying, and I quote, "From the time I first saw them until I left the Sabi Sands, the Mapogos killed between 90 and 110 other lions in the park. I also had to shoot approximately 15 lions that were so badly mauled by the Mapogos that their spines were severed, and they had to be put out of their misery." If lions are the kings of the jungle, the Mapogos were the kings of kings, because no one was able to stand against them. But with all of the testosterone and creatine pumping through the Mapogos, it was only a matter of time before they all started to turn on each other. The discord within the ranks was a classic case of sibling rivalry, as Mr. T was not content with Makulu's leadership and he wanted to be in charge, which led to a lot of conflict. In June of 2007, Makulu left the coalition for a while after having a falling out with Mr. T. So the other 5 Mapogos killed all of his cubs while he was away. Because lions. The following year, Makulu and Mr. T got into another fight, which Makulu won after biting Mr. T's legs. But his victory came at the cost of the coalition's cohesion, as Mr. T and Kinky Tail moved east, while the others stayed in the west. However, unlike the Kasakala chimpanzee community schism that erupted into the Gombe chimpanzee war, there was no hard feelings as Mr. T and Kinky Tail left. The two coalitions even worked together despite the occasional bickering and infighting the way that brothers and neighbours usually do. As such, the Mapogo Empire reached its peak in 2009, with the brothers ruling over a 170,000-acre empire and dominating 8 prides. Everything the light touched was their kingdom. While their dominion was marked by a big red streak across the landscape, the Mapogos didn't just leave utter desolation in their wake. After all, one of the perks of conquest was access to lionesses. So you can be sure that they took a very active role in restoring the local lion populations. All of the Mapogos fathered cubs from a number of the prides that they had conquered, though most of them were born to Makulu, who was the coalition's biggest shagger. And there was plenty to go around, because fights between male lions were so deadly that lionesses outnumbered them 3-1. And the Mapogos had killed so many male lions that it seemed like only one man could stop them. But you know how the saying goes. You can't be top dog forever, especially if you're a big cat. A king's time as ruler rises and falls like the sun, and the Mapogos were starting to get on a bit in years. They were starting to get a bit old. So, when new rivals emerged in 2010, it proved to be a very big deal. The 5-strong Majangilani coalition challenged the Mapogos on the Eastern Front by starting to leave their scent on Mr. T and Kinky Tail's turf. The Mapogo Empire had been untouchable because of the huge 6-strong force defending it. But the split in the ranks had weakened the eastern flank, since it only had 2 defenders. Kinky Tail and Mr. T were hunting buffalo when the Majangalanis showed up and immediately sprung into action. The Mapogos wasted no time in separating the challenger's leader from the rest of the coalition, chasing him down and going to fucking town. However, the Majangalani leader refused to give up, and he managed to scratch Mr. T's face and bite his ear. But there was no way that he could do any meaningful damage to this pair of hardened veterans, who held him down, tore his groin and hind legs open, broke his neck, and left him to die. Victorious, Kinky Tail and Mr. T rested and licked their wounds. That night, the other Majangalanis all set out to avenge their fallen brother. Two of them tracked down Kinky Tail, who gave chase, unaware that they were leading him into an ambush. The other two Majangalanis then came out behind Kinky Tail, completely surrounding him. Despite aging and being woefully outnumbered, Kinky Tail took on his four opponents anyway. And he was immediately fucking bodied. He was, oh god, it was bad. He was bitten in the neck and the back. He had his genitals bitten off, and he suffered a broken spine, which left him completely paralysed. And after that, his fate was sealed. Mr. T went in to the rescue, but he was routed by the superior numbers as two of the Majangalanis tried to run him down. With Kinky Tail completely broken and clearly not going anywhere, the other two joined the chase. Eventually, however, Mr. T managed to escape. But with Mr. T out of the way, the four Majangalanis were free to eat Kinky Tail alive and tear him limb from limb. It's not really much consolation, but at least he was too paralysed to feel what was going on in half of his body, so there's that. With his brother dead and his territory taken, an injured Mr. T fled west, and he returned to the Mapogo coalition. But the brothers had been split up for far too long, and this occasion was less of a family reunion and more of an outsider entering the Western Mapogo's territory. However, Mr. T's brothers surprisingly welcomed him back. It was just a shame that Mr. T wasn't coming back for his 20%, he was coming back for the whole fucking thing. So just days after his return, Mr. T said, "Long live the king," and ate all of his brother's cubs. Mr. T essentially usurped Makulu and took over the Mapogo coalition, claiming the leadership and the females for himself. An act of extreme cuckolding which earned him the nickname Satan among the humans that were watching him. On the 16th of March 2012, the new regime was challenged by a four-strong rival coalition called the Salatis, also known as the Southern Pride. In the initial skirmish, they managed to split up the remaining Mapogos after forcing them into a retreat. So the brothers regrouped and started doing a second training arc by going back to doing what they did best: hunting buffalo. Unfortunately, these hunts attracted the attention of the southern males, which helped them once again track down the Mapogos, and they ended up splitting them up once again. And they managed to isolate Mr. T, who was outnumbered 4-1. There was no escaping or fighting his way out of this one, but he fought anyway. And he put up a valiant effort in his last stand. But just as Mr. T had done to very many lions before him, the southern males paralysed his back legs with a bite to the spine, and then brutally tore him to shreds before leaving him to die. Live by the sword, die by the sword. After Mr. T's murder, the Mapogo's empire collapsed in the wake of invasions from other prides, mainly the Majangalanis. Much had been lost, but the four lions still made for a mighty coalition. Sure, they were getting on in years, but they still had a lot of experience between them. If they stayed united, could they have pulled off a Byzantine second wind? Well, we'll never fucking know. Skewspine and Dreadlocks mysteriously vanished over the next couple of years, and we don't know for sure what exactly happened to them. But Skewspine was probably shot by poachers, and it's believed that Dreadlocks wandered off the reserve and was shot by locals. And then, after a substantial shrinking of their territory and strength, Makulu and Pretty Boy were ousted completely after losing a fight to a coalition of 2 Kruger males, barely escaping with their lives. Nothing beside remained. Round the decay of that colossal empire, boundless and bare, the Sabi Sands stretch far away. Makulu and Pretty Boy were reduced to shells of their former selves. They were spotted a few times during their exile, the last occasion being in October of 2012, where they were spotted eating a buffalo together. The last time Makulu was seen by himself was in January of 2013, and he was very emaciated and very much worse for wear. But at almost 15 years old, he had well surpassed the average 8 to 10 year life expectancy of male lions, as had Pretty Boy, who had also managed to last for over a decade. But that didn't change the fact that they would have been fated to the exact same end they gave to so many others. Because, again, if you don't know much about lions, male lions don't die of old age. They don't. They die by being ripped apart by another lion. You've all seen Western movies about aging gunfighters. Well, these lions' pasts would have caught up with them, because there is always someone younger and tougher who would seek them out to try and make a name for themselves. But that would be the best case scenario. At least there's some honour in that. But according to a lion expert named Courtney Blunden, there is another likely outcome. And I quote, "His loss of condition and starvation will leave him defenceless against an arch rival, the hyena. Of all possibilities, this is the most disturbing and demoralising for us to witness." In other words, what is happening to Britain right now? But anyway, it's very possible that instead of going out swinging like Mr. T and Kinky Tail did, they just starved to death or were picked off by lesser opponents. That doesn't mean, however, that there is nothing left of what the Mapogos built. It's very possible that their grandsons and granddaughters are still out there continuing the carnage, though we can't really be sure if their parents were really sired by Mr. T or Kinky Tail because Africa. But the fall of the Mapogos is just the figurative and literal nature of the beast. An empire's time comes, it rises, hits its zenith, and then it falls. That's just a tragic fact of the cyclical nature of history, but that's just the deal. And why should the Mapogo Empire be any different, just because it was made up of lions? But that might be anthropomorphizing them a little bit too much. You know, they're lions, they had no grand designs or imperial ambitions. They conquered the Sabi Sands just so they could safely eat prey and fuck bitches. Were the Mapogos really great conquerors or sadistic butchers? Who's to say? But they died as they lived, so for better or worse, I suppose that's something. Personally, I think they did nothing more than embrace what they were. They're fucking lions. So they just embraced a lion's nature. However, nature is pretty fucking terrifying sometimes.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody just subscribe.